What am I gonna do with all that magnesium contaminated aluminum that I cast? I can't remelt it, it'll just ruin the next batch. How about a project that needs a lot of components that match? Something that won't kill anybody if it cracks. It's time for a scrap attack. Okay, really?
greensandmachines.com.
Alright, I'm gonna see if we can make this make sense before we get into the machining part of it. Basically, we have 4 different components. 2 of them, however, were just couplers, which wouldn't have been necessary if we were using full lengths of EMT, but since we were using only remnant pieces, they weren't long enough for the clothesline, so I used couplers to connect the pieces to make them longer. And there were couplers for the 1 inch and these for the 3/4. Then the main 2 pieces were these T's. This one fits around a 1 inch and then fits inside 3/4. Those are on the clothesline currently. I don't have extras of them. I do, however, have extras of these because it turned out I didn't have enough room to set up the entire clothesline, so I only have half of it set up. And this is the angle bracket for the 3/4. It fits around and then it fits inside. For everything that went inside of a tubing, I tapped it to make it easier to connect. Just drill 1 hole and thread a screw in. And then for everything that goes around, instead of tapping it here, I just drilled straight through because it was easier and stronger. And a big difference between this and the dolly brackets project was I realized I didn't actually need to mill flats on all the sides because none of the stuff was actually critically oriented 90 degrees that I needed to set it up in a vise that way, so it was a lot easier. So go watch the dolly brackets video for more info on that process. Oh, and there were also mounting flanges to bolt this thing down. They were just pieces of tubing turned down to fit inside the 1 inch EMT, a couple holes tapped in them, and then welded onto a base plate with screw holes in it. For everything besides the couplers, I drilled and tapped all the holes before turning them down. This would save a bunch of setups. And since we're dealing with aluminum, we're not going to have tremendous interrupted cut messing up everything when you turn it on the lathe with a hole in it already. Like in the dolly brackets video, I used these 9/32 spacer stub things to set up 2 pieces at a time while boring the holes in them. I've been using this method a lot lately for this material. It's very versatile. Most recently I used it to extend the handlebars on my new bike. First step is to use the edge finder to find the center between the stubs and the gap. There we will set 0 for the location to bore the hole. I start by plunging it with a 5/8 end mill, and then open it up with a 1 inch end mill. Since the EMT is an odd size on the outer diameter, I had to use the adjustable boring head to cut this size, whereas on my bicycle handlebars, those were a nominal 7/8, so I could just plunge it with a standard end mill. As far as the material went, I noticed the blue grades of magnesium aluminum were much harder to cut and came out shinier when machined. They were, however, more brittle, but it wasn't a total disaster like I thought it would be. I was glad that I was still able to tap threads in them. And they seem to be holding up pretty good. I mean, it's not like we're building aircraft landing gears with this stuff, it's just a clothesline. The tubes themselves were nothing special. They just needed to be cut to length and have the corresponding holes drilled in them. But of course I turned them to length because I'm a machinist. And also important to note, since we're fitting the connectors inside the tubing, they had to be deburred pretty good. Is it time for the assembly time lapse yet? This is what it would have looked like fully assembled, and I was still going to add 2 more rows of tubing in the middle, but due to space constraints, I only use half of it. This project helped me to consume about 9 of those slagnesium bars, and I think I used up all the blue ones. I stayed away from the black ones because those ones were the worst quality, but they'll find their use in another project.